Thank you for joining me in the first programming tutorial of this Python series. In this video, I will cover setting up your first Python project. So doing this, we'll look at a structure that you should do, where you should create your files, the file types needed for it to be recognized as a Python file. We'll then move on to create our first hello world, which is considered a simple program to create within the language. We'll then give a short introduction into variables and if statements. The first thing that we'll want to do when preparing to create our first Python project is to create a folder to house all of our Python files. There can be multiple Python files within a single project, so a folder is the best way to achieve this. So we're going to leave this folder empty and use Visual Studio Code to create our Python file. So on the main menu of Visual Studio Code, we'll want to add our folder so that we can use it. To do this, we'll use the Open folder and select the folder that we just created. As you can see here now, our folder, in this case YouTube tutorial, is now visible in the sidebar. We can then press this icon here to create a file within this for our project. The important part for this is to put .py at the end of the file so that Visual Studio Code knows that this is a Python file that we intend to use. So now that we've actually created our file, we should be able to use it without any issues. However, the thing that we'll want to take note of first is what version of Python is being used to run our code. This can be seen in the bottom left, and as you can see, it's currently using Python 3.8.3 64-bit. However, if yours doesn't say this, you can click on it and it will show all versions of Python which can be used on the system. For this tutorial, we will be using Python 3.8.3 64-bit version. As such, I'll select that to keep it the same. Now that Visual Studio has been fully set up and we've told it to use the correct version of Python, we can now work on our first Python program. So we've already created our Python file needed to do this. The first program that we'll create in Python is a simple hello world, which as stated will simply print to the console hello world. As stated in the first episode of this series, Python uses very simple English words to tell the computer what to do. So the first thing that we'll want to do is to tell Python that we want to print something to the screen. You can simply do this by typing print. As you can see, as we type this, Visual Studio will give us suggestions of what it thinks we're trying to type. We can press tab to use the autocomplete function. So in this case, the next thing that we'll need to do is tell Python what we wish to print. To do this, we'll use some parentheses so that it knows that we want to print the next statement. We'll want to print a string in this instance, so we'll use a single quote. However, you can also use a double quote. So we will now type in hello world. We can now run this program and it should work without any issues and print to the console hello world. As you can see, this has happened as intended and the simple expression has been printed to the Python console. We can also use this example to look at the basics of troubleshooting Python code. We can see here that the string is shown in orange and that the action we wish to take is shown in a light yellow colour. If we were to change the print statement to something that's not recognised by Python, say Laurent by changing the first letter to L, we can see that this has changed to white, showing that it isn't recognised and Python is trying to find something to represent it. So if we run this once more, we will now get an error and we can see where the error has occurred. The line that the error has occurred and the actual line itself are shown in the console. In this case, we can see that Visual Studio Code has told us that the error is with Laurent as it has not been defined. So Python can be very strict with this. If I was to change the print statement to a capital P, the same issue would occur and it will once again stay white. The reason for this is to print something it has to be a lowercase. So once again we can see that the error has been given by Visual Studio Code and it has told us that the error is with the word print and that is capital P. In this section of the tutorial, I want to show you how to use variables. Variables are very commonly used within Python and act as a container. They allow us to store information or a specific value. Variables can be used to get information from the user or to put the same piece of information in multiple places and then have this dynamically change as you update that variable so that you don't have to go through and rewrite it throughout your program. The easiest way to demonstrate this would be for me to write some statements to the console and switch some of these out for variables such as information that's shown multiple times. So, as you can see here, I've now printed multiple statements to the console, and when I run this, we can see that all the text appears exactly as it was typed into these print statements. However, you can see that we've used the word John and the number 7 twice. We can switch these out for variables to allow us to change those values without having to retype them into the print statements. So, we can go to the top of our Python file and create our variables. In this instance, we'll use a variable called name. We can then use a single equal sign to tell Python that we want to assign data to this variable. We will then set the variable to John and keep it the same. We've also used number 7 multiple times as his favourite number, so we can now also create another variable called favourite number. However, in this case, if we just put number 7, we can see that this is shown up as green. This is because it is now being stored as an integer. If we were to try and print this in our print statements, we'd get an error. This is because it's not recognised as a string and as such cannot be printed as one. So the first thing that we'll need to do to add the variables to our print statements is to delete the name John and put the reference in instead to the variable. So what we'll do is we'll go outside the single quotation mark and add a space. We'll then add an additional plus symbol to tell Python that we want to add something in addition to the string. As you can see, this is white, so Python is now trying to find what we're typing for what we want to add. So we can now add the name variable. As you can see, as we start typing it, Visual Studio Code will give us an autocomplete for the variable as it is recognised. If we now run this code, we can see that it comes out the same as before, and John is used in the case where we reference the variable. So we can now also do the same underneath. However, this time John is not at the end of the string. We'll go to the front of the word John itself and add a single quotation mark to close the string, and once again add another plus. However, unlike last time, we have now caught other text to be used as a variable that we don't want. This is shown by it being white. So this would cause an error if we were to run it again, so we need to turn the rest of this text back into a string. The first thing that we'll want to do is delete the word John and change it to our variable name, and then add another plus symbol afterwards and a single quotation mark, converting the text after our variable name back into string text to just be read like usual. So now if we run this program again, we can see that it runs without any issues, and John is printed as if it is typed directly into our statement. We can go ahead and test this by changing the variable name John to, let's say, Dan. Running this once more, we can see, hello, my name is Dan. I like the name Dan, it suits me. So now by changing this variable, we can change multiple aspects of the string without changing what we're printing. So as mentioned before, we set our favourite number variable to 7, and it was changed to green. This is because Python recognises it as an integer, which is correct because it's a number. If we go in and change the number 7 to our variable favourite number and attempt to run it, we can see that Python has given us an error, once again showing us the line it has occurred on and showing us what is on that line. It has also told us the error and that it cannot concatenate str, which means that it cannot convert the integer to a string. So we'll have to manually tell Python that we want to convert this integer to a string so that we can print it. So the way to do this would be to go before the variable and type in str, and then using parentheses to enclose the variable name. We will then want to make sure that all the parentheses are closed so that there are an even amount of open and closed parentheses. And we can see that the str has now changed to green, showing us that Python is calling on a different class to convert the integer to a string so that we can print it. So if we run this again, we can see that there are no issues with the favourite number variable. and that the same thing can occur on the line underneath. Like on line 5 where we wanted to use a variable in the middle of a string. So we can remove the number 7, once again using a single quotation mark to close the string, and add our plus sign before adding our favourite number variable. We can then close this once again using another plus sign and another single quotation mark. Once again running this code, we can see that the whole thing is printed as intended with our numbers and our variable names. So we can now go through and, for example, change our integer value to 80 and it will print. Hello, my name is Dan. I like the name Dan, it suits me. My favourite number is 80. I've always liked the number 80 since I was young. But now say that we actually change this. So we need something that wasn't an integer that could actually be put into a string, say 70. You can see that although we've now changed this variable to a string, we can still leave in the conversion within the print statement. In fact, we've actually just told Python with the conversion statement, no matter what this is, to try and convert it to a string so that I can place it in my print. There are some important things to take into consideration when using variables. The first is that variables cannot have spaces. An example here is if I do favourite space number, this will not work. These come up as two separate things. You can check this by double clicking on one of them, which will highlight the entire string or word which is currently being used as part of that variable. So if I was now to do is give this quote unquote variable a string to the end to add it to a print statement, we can see that it does not appear in the autofill. If we ignore this and type it in anyway and run the code, we can see that an error is given, showing us that the error is with space in the variable name. So, in today's tutorial we've looked at the basic functions of printing and we've used that to create a basic Hello World program. We've also looked into the basics of variables and how they are commonly used and how you can use them throughout your Python programs. We've also shown that you need to be specific when converting things in Python, as it will not automatically do this for you. So one more thing that I'll cover at the end of this is to ask the user for input and to then assign this to a variable. In this case what we'll do is we'll ask the user to input their name and then have our Python program run from this. Since we cannot have spaces in our variables, I will use an underscore instead and enter the variable user underscore name. We'll then want to use a single equals sign once again to tell Python that we want to add data to this. Instead of then entering this data, what we'll do is tell Python that we want the user to input this data for us using the input. We will then open parentheses once more to tell Python that we want to add more information in this and then put in our single quotation marks. We will then enter in this as a string, what is your name? This allows us to print this to the user and then wait for them to give us a response. We can then use what we have learned earlier in this tutorial to print a response to the user displaying the variable or the information that they have given us in the form of that variable. So we'll once again do print quotation marks hello. We'll then enter that string and enter our variable name, and then once again start a new string and put how are you. If we now run this program, we can see that Python doesn't just run the whole thing. It is instead waiting for us to provide a user input based on the question, what is your name? So if I now type in my name into this, Kristen, we can see that Python now instantly gives us a response with hello Kristen, how are you? With this, I want you to go off and to create your own program to ask for user input, or maybe even potentially multiple inputs, and then to give that information back to the user in the form of a sentence. For anyone needing help or wanting to talk, I have created a Discord server, which you can find the link down below, or can find by going to kristensmout.com/discord.